The Me Too movement has quite rightly called times up on sexual harassment. Established institutions have been called out for their lack of equal pay. And the underrepresentation of women is finally being acknowledged in politics and business. But does this mean feminism has won? Unlikely. If the election of Trump and the EU referendum tells us anything, it's that you cannot assume an argument is won just because the opposing view has become marginalised. In both these cases, we assumed victory and stopped listening to the misgivings on the other side. Failure to engage the quiet minority or majority just leads to temporary victory until someone comes along who is able to articulate the way they are thinking. To stop this happening here, it's time for women of the world to unite with like-minded men. The path towards gender equality is something that can only be achieved together. Failure to include men in the discussion will not create long-term sustainable change. So forget the battle of the sexes. It's time for collaboration of the sexes.
I was jotting a little bit of that down, June. Failure to include men. In what way? Spell that out. Give me the details of that failure.
Yes, and I'll be honest, I just did it to you and Greg a minute ago there. Example with Me Too and Time's Up. I think what's happened is that there are a lot of good men, the majority of good men out there, who feel that they would want to contribute to this conversation, but they're too scared of being shouted down, and they're too scared to even attempt to engage in the debate. And I think it's really important. Sorry, go on.
Well, I mean, I can't speak for Greg, but I wasn't too scared. But how can I possibly identify with, to use your word, a newborn, attractive young woman who's been preyed on by a man in a position of power? I can't...
No, but what...
Because that's what you three were going at. And I think probably that's why Greg and I kept a respectful silence, because you've experienced it, we don't.
No, but what you can do and what we can do is actually engage in a discussion and include you about what the new terms should be.
And do you think... When I say you, I don't mean you personally, but you think your cause has failed to do that?
Yeah, for sure.
So why? Does the onus not possibly lie with you folk?
It lies with both. It lies in creating a platform and a safe space where you feel comfortable enough to actually contribute to the conversation. And I think at the moment the conversation is very one-sided. What do you think, Rachel?
I think that it's really important not to shut men down when they have something to say, because, you know, there's so much evidence that shows that men are reluctant to identify as feminists.
Yes.
And actually,
reason.
Sky did a poll yesterday which showed, I thought, an astonishing number of both men and women who thought that feminism has gone too far.
And actually, all 40%. What does too far mean?
Well, I don't know what too far means, but it's like... There's so much evidence showing, well, you know, when there are 30% of women across the board in public life, people think basically too many.
Yes.
Too many. Because you see, when women went to Oxford, somebody said the monstrous regiment of women. There were about sort of 7% of women at Oxford. Anyway, so that's what I mean.
I mean, I've always regarded myself as a feminist.
Good.
Always.
Are you a feminist,
I've
Nick?
Disproportionately, over the years, promoted women.
Yeah.
Do you think that men
I've done
and
it
women
not
are equal?
because of a political thing, but because...
say it, I'm a feminist.
Well, I think men and women are equal, yes. Does that mean I'm a feminist? Is that the pure definition of feminism? Then I'm a feminist.
OK, but then why... Then I'll bring you back in.
Will you campaign... Will you take action so that the inequalities are changed?
I mean, I'm no longer in a position that I hire people, but I can honestly tell you all the time I was hiring people for newspapers.
You are one of the most prominent voices on your station, so you actually can influence.
Do you mind? I'd like to say
you are the most, sorry.
Yeah.
So you can use your platform.
Yeah, you can
use your platform to say women should be paid equally.
No, I can't say
given equal opportunity.
No,
they should have equal opportunities.
Because we pay on ability.
But you could you could use your platform to say to your bosses that they should have more women as
if they're up to the job, yes.
Precisely.
And women should.
But it's a different industry.
And women shouldn't have to do all the caring work while men run everything.
Let me just say, when I came in... You say it's if they're up to the job. That's an interesting question.
Yes.
Do you apply the same criteria to men?
To men?
Yes.
Assume?
And you don't think that disproportionately men are likely to get the job rather than the woman just because they're men?
I mean, it's unfair because the boss is the radio, but if you look at the newsroom, all the reporters bar one is a woman. Yeah. So, certainly, I would suggest that perhaps the situation is changing. Most of the reporter voices are women.
Carol, can I let you come?
It's strangely quiet, Carol, isn't she?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Let's get used to this.
I came into reception this morning, interesting, a bunch of 10 people came in through a door, mixed group of men and women, and they all shouted, Happy International Women's Day,
How
everyone, which I
wonderful.
thought was... odd. But yeah, good. But if you want to go, but let's go back to Hollywood a little bit. And you talk about men and women have to join together. The men in Hollywood sat back 4 years
Too many of them,
and did nothing while the women were being abused.
I know, but wait,
they did nothing.
What happened to Matt Damon when he pointed out, I thought correctly, that a woman being patted on the butt was not the same. It wasn't the same category of abuse as a woman who had been raped. And I happen to agree with Matt Damon. But what happened was he was shut down to leave Twitter. You know, terrible mayor.
He was shouted down because at that point this campaign had gained this kind of momentum. And had he said it last year, it probably wouldn't have mattered that much. But you know, the men in Hollywood, you know, and it really made me cross when very prominent men, and I've been told I can't say their names again, spoke out when this was happening and said, well, I didn't know this was going on. Were they walking around blindfold the whole time?
They all knew.
But with the case of that, it was men and women.
So they were either
people that
seeing it happening and doing nothing, or they were complicit in it.
Anyway, can we have a look at Emma Watson for He for She? I love this campaign, and I think this is what we need more of. We've got that clip.
We want to end gender inequality. And to do this, we need everyone involved. This is the first campaign of its kind at the UN. We want to try and galvanise as many men and boys as possible to be advocates for change.
I love this campaign, and I think actually this has got to be what Me Too and Time's Up moves on to.
I was in Uganda for International Women's Day about 3 years ago.
What the hell were you doing in Uganda for International Women's Day?
I wasn't there.
Oh, God, you've had some freebies in your life, but that's a belter.
Now, let me finish. I actually was paying. But what was interesting was a group of women, obviously very poor, who had just made some money for the first time in their lives, and we said, well, what are you going to do with it? And one woman said,
Spend it on the
for the
family.
first time ever, I've bought myself a new dress. For international, so I can wear it on International Women's
Me
Day.
Too, He Too, whatever it's called. I think it's really important to get to the male, the young boys early. The consent classes across Africa, especially in Kenya, have been incredibly successful in reducing the rate of rape as well in the country.
But I mean, but if you go to a place like Uganda, I mean, the difference between what most men do and what most women do is massive, and women disproportionately do the work. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And yet the men disproportionately play cards and drink.
But those are cultural things that I think are... Well, I think what I'm talking about is also a Western conversation. I think you've got to look at the pace of things. So in terms of how far we move where developing countries are concerned, it's different to what we can do here. I think we can actually move far
But do you agree that there's a kind of feminism...
Just because women are more emancipated in the
Do you
West
agree that there's a kind of feminism in this country that sometimes and oftentimes alienates men? I think there is.
I do, and that's why that's the whole point of this discussion. I really think we have to make sure we include men in the conversation.
But you can't if they feel excluded by the way
but that's why women like us
feminist
have to make sure that we are creating an open forum for that. Now, can I show you this? I have to say, I was so confused by this. So this is a new beer. I don't drink, but I mean, you all do, so maybe you'll like it. By Brewdog, and they created a pink IPA. And they're saying that they were trying to be sarcastic, but to me, like, sort of pointless. What's the purpose of that?
Well, let me say what Brewdog are saying. Sarah Warman, I stress that, for it is a woman.
Global head... men trying to get in the conversation.
Global head of marketing at Brewdog says, Pink IPA is clearly an over-the-top ridiculing of the types of sexist marketing we often see. We always anticipated that some people might not immediately appreciate the irony of Pink IPA, but that did not deter us in our mission to spark a conversation about the gender pay.
But why didn't they do a gender
I didn't make the beer, I'm only reading it out.
Presumably, it's like buying a pink Lady Bic. You know, is it going to be much more expensive than the male Brewdog beer?
You don't have a problem with a pink shaver, do you?
I do.
Of course I do.
Why?
You can't hold a pen or
more.
shave unless it's pink.
Well,
I don't quite get that.
It's one of the greatest crimes of society.
I don't understand.
No.
Women's products, if they're marketed to women, they can put up a sort of 10 to 20% markup on it. They just put it in pink.
Well, don't
of course
buy them.
It is.
We'll just buy the blokes' ones.
That's what I do, thank you.
Well, that would seem to solve
Thanks
the
for the
problem.
tip.